There it is. Okay. Yeah, so welcome those of you who are in attendance for tonight's mini conference presentation. My name is Matthew Nannis. I'm the Executive Director of Pivot Point WNC, and we are fortunate enough, excuse me, to have, oh, look at that. I put the wrong title in the email that I sent out. Have Tracy Hopkins with us this evening for a presentation. Excuse me, the purpose of these mini conferences, we do these once a month, the last Thursday of the month, is to provide an opportunity for those who specialize and have passions in specific areas of mental health, growth, community systems, and the like to utilize this platform to share that knowledge and wisdom, ask some probing questions, maybe get people thinking about things in a different way. And we try and keep these relatively small, which hasn't proven to be a problem yet. But we might have some more additional guests come on as the time plays out. But I would like to introduce and thank again Tracy for joining us this evening.
Yay. Thanks for having me. I do appreciate the level of intimacy during these speaking engagements, because those of you who do know me may be surprised to hear that I actually do get nervous when it comes to these speaking engagements. It's both a mixture of excitement and anxious energies that surrounds the types of the various topics that I end up speaking about, because they are so close to my heart when I do these speaking engagements. So just to give you all kind of an idea of what the next hour together, or I guess hour and a half with the Q&A, but the next hour of me sharing looks like is when I think about talking about topics that involve inclusion and belonging, it's like I said, it's very close to my heart. And so I refrain from just launching into providing the information, if you will. I want to make sure that I share with you a little bit about myself as well. And so there will be an introduction so that you get to know me a little bit deeper. And then I am a firm believer that there are those who came before me and those who will come after me that have done a really great job of putting exceptional content that already exists. And so, and what I mean by that is an hour seems like a lot of time for me to be talking. And so what I like to do is utilize short video clips to either emphasize any points that I might be sharing and or use it as a launching point. And so you'll see various clips throughout this presentation. And then the other part is I'll share some of the expectations that I might want to share with you as it relates to what this is and what this isn't. As well as some invitations. And all of that will happen prior to launching into the conversation. So with that being said, I'll share just a little bit about me. I identify as a biracial, multicultural, cisgender female. I am a daughter of an immigrant. I was born and raised in Seoul. Well, I was born in Seoul, South Korea, and I was raised in various cities and towns in South Korea until the age of almost 10, and then moved to the United States. And so my mother is Korean, my father is African-American, and for the longest time, I struggled with answering the question of who I was as it relates to my racial identity. And so I think at the ripe old age of my early 20s, I came up with a terminology called CORAC. And yes, thank you. I made up the terminology CORAC, and it's the core from Korea and ACT from Black, and you mush it together and you get a CORAC. And as silly as that might sound, and as simple as that might sound, I have to tell you that just by creating a terminology that encompassed both of my identities, it was one of probably the first memorable times in my life where I felt a sense of freedom and or liberation. So ultimately, the reason why I share a lot about the fact that I grew up in a different country, I was born and raised in a different country and came to the United States, because this topic of inclusion and belonging apparently has been really important to me for a long time. Coming to the United States, I recognized that I learned very quickly at a very young age how to fly under the radar. I learned that there are certain parts of me that might not be as appealing in the eyes of the folks who predominantly occupied the US. And I learned the parts of me that I could accentuate or lift up that seemed to be something that was seen as worthy or worthwhile. And ultimately, no one said this to me in big neon lights and or explicitly. And growing up in Southern Illinois, I quickly learned that to be Black was not acceptable, honorable, good. And yet to be Asian, to be Korean, had a lot of interesting stereotypes that came along with it. And we were the model minority, right? And so ultimately knowing what to lift up and what to downplay, and then ultimately above all, humor went a long way. So I definitely learned to mask whatever it was that was going on with humor. So again, the importance of all the background information is that, right here, I'm coming to you at the age of 44, and the concept of inclusion and belonging, and why I hope that every individual and every organization that's out there really centers the concept of belonging in not just our work within the organizations, but within our personal lives. It's I would say probably one of my biggest life purposes, right? There's a level of it's a level of, again, liberation and freedom that comes with allowing someone to fully feel the sense of belonging that we all chase. So that's a little bit about me. I guess I should talk about my work history. I've worked in mental health field for the past 2 decades, in both wilderness settings and residential settings, as frontline staff to administrative staff to everything in between. I think that having all the various roles that I've played has really allowed me to understand a student's journey through treatment process, as well as the family's challenges and expectations that come along with the process of treatment or the journey of treatment. I also am a diversity coach. I was able to receive my training and certification through Coach Diversity Institute. For those of you who might be looking for something like this, they are I believe, the only organization in the International Coaching Federation that really centers the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion when they are training their coaches. And so while my certification says certified professional diversity coach, that does not mean that I am simply a diversity, equity, inclusion coach. It means that walking into organizations, working with individuals, the framework and the lens through which I've been trained really allow me to see how inclusion and belonging play into everything. So yeah, I think that's probably more than enough about me for now. Some of the expectations that I want to make sure that you all are aware of before we get going is that I don't believe that there are quote unquote experts in the room. I know that Matt and the Pivot Point WNC crew have been really gracious enough to invite me into this space to talk about a particular topic. And I don't come to you as an expert. I definitely don't come to you as a thought leader either. If anything, I'm a thought seeker. I really enjoy having conversations with individuals and ultimately have a lot of curiosities of my own, and want to be able to plant seeds of curiosity, and encourage people to continue to ask the why behind why did things come to be the way that it is, and why do we hold the beliefs that we do. And then, like I said earlier, there are so many people who already have amazing content that's out there, and so what you can expect is me utilizing some of their information to be able to continue talking about what we're here to talk about. What you won't get from me is a PowerPoint presentation. And you won't get from me is a neat little bow at the end of it all. I don't believe that conversations like this or conversations in general come with a 30-minute sitcom ending. And so if anything, you may leave here with more questions than you might have from the start of this conversation. And I keep saying conversation because even though I'm the one up here speaking, I do invite this. I do invite you all to bring your voices in, which is why I do appreciate the level of intimacy that this group is allowing. The other part that I wanted to get to is extending my invitations to everyone that's participating here. As you see some of the videos, as you hear some of the things that I share with you this evening, well, it might not be evening depending on where you are, but if you're on the East Coast, it's evening. Please take notice of how you feel and where you might feel it. I don't know about you, but sometimes I'm a note taker, and what I can appreciate about the note-taking process is not necessarily what someone said, but ultimately jotting down maybe a phrase that someone said, and jotting down some of the feelings that I had that's associated with it, so that when I come back to my notes, I can do a deeper dive of trying to figure out, why did I feel that way? Where did it come from? I'm not quite sure if some of the information that I will be sharing, some of the videos that I will be sharing, will bring up some difficult and challenging emotions. And in the case that it does, please know that, please take care of yourself, and take the space that you need. Videos are obviously off, and yeah, if you need to just kind of step away, take a breath, close your eyes for a bit, move your body, please, we invite you to do that. The other piece is that you may not agree with what it is that I'm sharing, and that, believe it or not, is okay. Going back to that piece of me not being an expert really keeps coming, in full circle, and that I really enjoy having dialogue, and am very curious about these concepts. And what I'm sharing with you is either my experience and the conclusions that I may have drawn to this point. And so if you don't agree, yeah, my invitation for you is to, if you feel compelled, let me know. If you don't feel compelled to share, that's okay too. I would hope that you continue to explore maybe why. Yeah, that's it. Those are the invitations that I have for you. So we'll get going. This is really interesting to not have any kind of feedback. So ultimately, here's the thing. Inclusion and belonging, the reason why, thank you, Matt. um, Appreciate it. It's not just me in the room. Inclusion and belonging. Here's why I will say that I have chosen to focus on those two terminologies rather than diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think over the years of doing presentations on DEI, and then experiencing the pandemic in the ways that we did, where we ended up not being able to engage personally, and feeling isolated, and what I call, please excuse me, but what I call the Great White Awakening that occurred after the murder of George Floyd. I began to notice that DEI quickly became a buzz terminology, and it was the meaning of what DEI really meant to me became diluted. And so the more I started to focus on this work, I recognized, for me, inclusion and belonging opened up a bigger umbrella in which it houses diversity, equity, obviously inclusion. And so that's why the focus of tonight is really helping folks understand what it means when I talk about, or when folks talk about, inclusion and belonging. So I am a big fan of dancing, and I am also a big fan of metaphors. Matt too also loves to dance. Don't let him tell you otherwise. But ultimately, when I think of inclusion, it's essentially, when you're talking about inclusion, it's basically you and all of your identities being factored into the equation, and that you simply were not an afterthought. And when we think about it in the reference to a dance, I think about inclusion being that, when you're planning a party, you're planning a dance party, and specifically that you were asked to share your input on the decorations and what was going to be played, right? You're being asked to put your voice into the space. That's how I see inclusion. When I think of belonging, I always feel like taking the biggest breath and doing a deep exhale, right? Because when I think about that, it's beyond having your insights and contributions be valued. It's knowing that you can be your truest self in whatever space, and that the person that you are at home with your closest friends is also the person that can show up at work or within your community, that you don't have to necessarily change. And so in reference to the metaphor of a dance party, you could think about someone who can feel very comfortable walking up to that DJ and asking to play a specific song, knowing, maybe not knowing that everybody and their mama might not see eye to eye with you on it, but that you can, and that folks will enjoy that choice that you made, right? You can fully be yourself. And so we talk about, I know that there are lots of people that are out there that talk about how achieving a sense of belonging is truly important. Whether you're listening to Brene Brown, whether you are looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we talk about, our basic fundamental needs, one of which being belonging. I think that part of it might be the reason why we are wired to chase it has to do with just, if you want to go way back in the day, it's just our innate survival instincts that live within us that increase, that we know it increases our chance for survival, right? That herd mentality. So that might be part of it. I think the thing that really rings for me when I think of why we're wired to chase this sense of belonging and to achieve it really has to do with the importance of feeling deeply connected to others, and that being part of a community, being part of something really increases our protective factors when we're trying to manage stress, when we're trying to deal with various behavioral issues. And so again, it's something that we are all striving for, and yet walking this earth as someone who looks like me, who holds the identities that I do, I can't help but recognize that it's not always easy for certain people to really be able to obtain that sense of belonging that I think should be a human right, right? So with that being said, I want to show you this first clip. This woman is an HR professional, and she, anyway, I won't say too much because I really appreciate the way that she expresses the importance of inclusion and belonging. So I'll share that with you right now.
I'm calling dibs on diversity, inclusion, and belonging. All three, they're necessary, but without the other, they're insufficient. And so diversity is a fact. It's everything that makes you and I unique, the seen and the unseen. But if you actually think in totality what makes up each and every one of us, we cannot separate those aspects when we walk into a door. So I am a mom, I'm a sister, I'm dyslexic, so I have a learning process challenge, I'll say. I come from a big family, I'm Catholic, I'm this, I'm that. Diversity is all those elements. I'm left-handed, scissors bother me. Like working in a right-handed world is a challenge. And so how you show up, who you are, that is the diversity. The inclusion part is the action of creating fairness, hopefully. It is the act of including you to the dance. It's the act of hiring and trying to put in fair practices at work. Inclusion are our attempts to welcome and acknowledge what makes us diverse and make it a welcoming workplace, a fair workplace, creating opportunity across every moment that matters. We still haven't gotten that part right, but I know that if people think about those moments that matter, then inclusive behaviors start happening. How we coach our leaders, how we lean in to look at culture add, not fit, opening up our aperture for differences, looking for the add, not the same. That's inclusion. But only, and I mean this, only when you have that sense of belonging in your heart, that you are part of a community, that you can be uniquely you, is when you unlock the power of dibs. And belonging is a human need. It is genetically wired in each and every one of us. We're compelled to belong. And we're actually compelled to belong in our unique way. And that compelling need to belong has a light side, meaning unlocking my authentic self and be leaning in and have high engagement. And there's a shadow of belonging where if I feel in threat, I will cloak. I will pretend to be something I'm not so I fit in. So belonging is an inherent need, and doing it and navigating this gracefully at work is what is the imperative.
I don't know if you could see the full screen, but she's on LinkedIn, and it's a whole training series. And so I'm happy to share the link and things like that so that you have access to it. She reminded me of the conversations that I have had and continue to have when we talk about, what does it really mean to feel like, what does it mean when we say a sense of belonging, right? And it's been a fascinating journey talking to various people from various walks of life and experiences. And for me, what I gained, one of the things that I gained from the conversation is that a sense of belonging is a two-way street. What I mean by that is it's not just about others creating an environment that allows me to be me. it's the two-way street really comes into play where I know that I have had to go through my own personal development of really feeling more grounded in who I am and being okay, and really dismantling the narratives that I have internalized from this world that told me one story or another. And so through that process, it gave me the courage is so overused. It gave me the ability, right, or the wherewithal, or the tools and the skills to really stand firmly in my sacred ground and be able to show up in that manner. Awareness is great, yes. um, again, I don't know what your process might have been thus far, or if you've truly asked yourself, what is the meaning of belonging? And if you haven't, I would love to invite you to have that conversation and have that with other people, because it's one of those words that you think you know the definition, but when you really ask yourself to provide the words to define belonging, I found it to be rather challenging, because there's such complexities and nuances that surround it, right? So knowing that this is something that we are wired to chase, knowing that this is something that we all crave, I think about well, what gets in the way? Why is it that there are certain people that probably walk through this life really feeling like they've always had a place in this world, no matter where they showed up, versus the individuals that walk into spaces and have to immediately feel like they have to prove that they are worthy of being where they are, right? And or not necessarily feeling comfortable being their truest selves, and rather, in order to feel like they belong, really what they're doing is trying to fit in and assimilate, right? So y'all have probably heard of this terminology. Again, nothing I share with you today is going to be the most profound thing. It's just inviting you all to see things, well, to truly see things, right? Things that we haven't been looking for or looking at. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the things that might get in the way of allowing people to truly find their sense of belonging. And one of those things is what we call unconscious bias, right? The other thing that we're wired to do is just to put things into categories. Again, our brain, our bodies are fascinating. We are designed to quickly put things in categories because we want to survive. We don't want to take the time as mental health care professionals, have a conversation with that big bear that might, eat you. Your body knows you need to get away from it. So we're wired for things like the implicit biases that we hold. And what I want to show you right now is just doing a deeper dive of what unconscious bias really is, so that we can talk about how it gets in the way of folks really being able to gain that sense of belonging. That was the best image.
Your brain, by some accounts, receives roughly 11 million pieces of information each second, but your conscious brain is only able to process about 40. How do you handle all the rest? You handle it because you're really using two brains. Your conscious brain, which works with facts and data, has very little capacity and processes information slowly, and your unconscious brain, which is habit and intuition driven, has huge capacity and is really fast. One of your unconscious brain's best tricks is its ability to recognize patterns and use them to assign people and things to categories, allowing your unconscious brain to deal with all of the known, not dangerous issues, and leave only the few unknown or dangerous issues to your conscious brain. This allows us to recognize a pattern and act on it, rather than having to think about every interaction as if we were experiencing it for the first time. We can glance at that four-legged animal and know if it's a wolf or a cocker spaniel. That recognition allows us to make assumptions about the animal facing us, that the wolf belongs to the wild animal category and is likely to be dangerous, or that the cocker spaniel is in the domestic dog category and not likely to be dangerous. The assumptions we make about these pattern groups are likely to be based on our own experiences, on information we have gained from our culture or background, or from the media we listen to or people we admire. Unfortunately, those assumptions are often wrong. When we categorize people, our brains apply two other tools. One is affinity bias, a hardwired preference to respond positively to people who look, sound, and act like ourselves. Brain imaging scans show that when people are shown images of faces that differ from their own, it activates in milliseconds activity in the part of the unconscious brain that alerts us to possible danger. This may reflect a survival tool left over from ancient times when danger often came from those outside our immediate group. Today, however, this means the associations and biases are likely to be unconsciously activated every time when we come across a member of a group, even if we consciously reject group stereotypes. In addition to affinity bias, our unconscious brain categorizes people into groups and then connects those groups to our learned ideas or constructs about what is good or bad. Now, we've decided whether someone is like us or not, and whether they're good or not, all within milliseconds of meeting them. So, what can you do to manage your unconscious biases? You've already started by just learning about unconscious bias. Now, identify your own biases and address one at a time by building inclusive habits. Remember, if you do not intentionally, deliberately, and proactively include, you will unintentionally exclude.
I love those videos only because I love the animation. Not only because, but that's one of my favorite things. Again, I think unconscious bias are also, some people refer to as implicit biases. It can feel overwhelming at times. I know it can for me because it's ultimately I get to the place of saying, okay, so you're telling me that what I don't know is what's causing harm. So if I don't know what I don't know, how do I make things better? And so that last bit of the clip really is talking about how, this is the first step. Like, let us all realize there are things that we just don't know. Let's humble ourselves and recognize that there are things that we don't know. The thing that I want to also lift up in terms of like how unconscious bias gets in the way of allowing for individuals to achieve a deep sense of belonging has to do with like, ultimately, when we really think about the institutions that we're a part of, the systems that we're a part of, I'm just going to get down to the basics. Think about who created these institutions, who created the criterias, and who they had in mind when they created it, right? So as the systems continue on to go unchallenged, right? And the structures and the systems continue to be operating through a lens and through a lived experience that does not represent all people. Those who sit within the margins and at the intersections, it's really easy to walk into a space and have the nicest person greet you and feel instantly that you don't belong, because there is nothing about the culture of that space that reflects you, right? And so I want to lift up the magnitude of how much unconscious bias impacts and gets in the way and challenges, presents challenges to individuals and institutions when it comes to that. And really talking about the importance of why we need to make sure that we're looking at all of that. The other piece that comes into play that goes hand in hand with unconscious bias is microaggressions. I think the reason why microaggressions are so big is that they're so subtle. They can be intentional. Oftentimes I feel like they're unintentional interactions and behaviors that perpetuate these biases, especially towards historically marginalized groups. And so, I often think about microaggressions as invisible paper cuts. And so the person that's feeling them y'all know what my paper cuts feel like. You may not bleed, but those things hurt. So think about it's cumulative. It's throughout the day. It's over a week. It's over months that you're continually experiencing these microaggressions, but because they come across as invisible, the things that you might want to share, the difficulties, the challenges, there could be some gaslighting associated with it. There could be levels of dismissal that's associated with it. There could be a level of internalizing that maybe I am making all of this stuff up, right? And ultimately, all of those components play into the barriers that have been created just within our society and systemically that prevent folks who sit within the margins and at the intersections from feeling a deep sense of belonging. I am going to show you this clip. I'm fully going to be transparent here in that it may not actually go with what we're talking about, but it's so damn good. I think it does. And if anything, you're gonna appreciate what I'm about to show you.
I'm from Haiti and Nigeria. Like 3 things, like I'm Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Black. I'm biracial. I have an African-American father and an Irish-American mom.
My name's Lamine. I'm Muslim.
I'm Indian, British, Scottish, and American.
My parents are from Venezuela, and I was sharing like one of the foods that we eat, and then I got made fun of. They were like, "What is that? Ew. Oh, ew, what is that?" And like I cried because I felt like, oh, there's something wrong where I'm from. Like maybe like it's bad. Like I'm different.
I am an African-American adopted girl, only child, and I live with my 2 dads. I remember when I was younger, I went with my family to a restaurant, and they made us pay in advance just in case we didn't pay afterwards, and that was kind of upsetting.
You start to notice that people are different, and you have comments, they might be racist or they might not be, but by the time you get older, you know that it is racist and you should stop.
I feel a little scared about if I, just walk down the street, cops might just think I'm doing something bad, and then if I try to explain to them, they won't listen and then just start beating me up and doing terrible things to me.
I think there's this anxiety that kind of comes with being biracial, that kind of eats away at you, almost like you have to prove yourself that you're one or the other. For example, I hear the phrase, "You're not Black," all the time. People sometimes think that I'm supposed to talk ghetto or whatever that is. Oh, she's uneducated because she's African American.
Because I'm Hispanic or Latino, I can't have a lot of money.
Just this weekend, I went with my friend to Urban Outfitters, and we were shopping, and I really wanted to try on this dress, and then this lady that was just like there, she was kind of like watching me, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna steal it or anything.
I think white privilege is the idea that in your everyday life you're getting treated differently and sometimes with more respect, or people just trust you more, or they have certain expectations of you, like you might be smarter or you might be wealthier because you're white. It makes me feel guilty sometimes, even though it's not my fault. Like, I feel guilty for having a privilege that like I don't deserve.
If I was ever like the mayor or something that controls the policeman, I would want to go out and look in the neighborhoods where there are people that's very friendly, so you can pick them instead of like these guys that's just doing all this training. It's better to pick people that's more minded with the community than to just pick some new guy and get on the street. Like, it's just not gonna work out.
We have like these kids from, they're Ecuadorian, and they get made fun of because they look Mexican, and they get told on a daily basis, oh, you like tacos? Oh, you like churros? How come I saw your mom on the corner selling ices? Like, it's like, I feel bad for them personally, because I'm like, wow, like, they're not, and like, even though they tell them I'm not Mexican, I'm Ecuadorian, they still get teased.
I think that when you pair music with young humans who get to express their stories, oh, we're still expressing, turns out. It can, oh, it's not pausing, y'all. I'm sorry. Oh, there it goes. There it goes. I think it, thank you, Teresa, for laughing. For those of y'all who don't know, Teresa and I work together, and we're good friends. And so, yes, thank you for showing up. So the video definitely does, go along very well, talking about the impacts of implicit bias. It talks a lot about the impact of the microaggressions that they face. And I think what I want to impress upon folks here is that all of the kids that were interviewed were 12 years old, right? 12 years old. And so this piece where we can we know where we don't fit in, where we're not wanted, happens at such a young age, because they're able to articulate that at age 12. So you know that they've been experiencing it for a while. And so, we've talked about all of these components of like, it's such a, if we could all band together, and make it a mission to create all spaces where everyone felt a deep sense of belonging, and that be our mission, I would be a happy individual. And in order to do that, I do think that we have to understand the ugly underbellies of how pervasive the systems of oppressions really are within our society. It's because we have to understand what it is and how it came to be for us to even think about dismantling and or creating a new system. So with that being said, we talked about the unconscious bias, we talked about microaggressions. These are all the challenges that are in the way, in full recognition that there are people coming into our lives and in our workspace that don't have the same experiences as you do or as I do, right? That don't navigate the world in which, the way that you do or I do. And yet, when we think about the services, the service providers that are out there, it's very, quote unquote, universal, where it is very much a one size fits all. Even though, and I'll kind of call out our own like mental behavioral healthcare, system, where we say that we really meet the individuals where they're at. and create an individualized treatment plan, if you really break it down, go back to the fact that the way in which I, as a mental health practitioner or therapist, have been trained to create an individualized treatment plan, to provide services, all came from a curriculum within an institution that was designed by a person with a limited scope of perspectives and lived experiences. And so that's what I mean by there's a one size fits all component at play here. Even though so many of us say that we're individualizing treatment plans and we're really, meeting people where they're at. So, in my throes of being super curious about all of these things, I by no means am someone who is deeply rooted in the 5 love languages. I just kept the thought that kept coming up for me is that platinum rule, really, right? If the golden rule is, and so many of us were taught, with that golden rule of like, make sure you treat others the way that you want to be treated, right? And so if that's the golden rule, and the platinum rule really is treat people the way that they wish to be treated, it really highlights the components of we have to do our own work of really broadening our mindset, that the way in which I move through the world is not the only way, right? That somebody else might see things and feel things and do things differently, and have experiences that I have never encountered. And so if I'm in the service industry, especially if I'm in the mental health service industry, it is our, I think, moral obligation to do our individual work, to understand the entire person, and be able to factor that into the equation when we're doing work with them. And so the love languages really came up for me where I know that that's kind of a well-known thing that's out there, where we talk about like knowing your love language, like how do you want to be loved, and making sure that you are providing that. And I know that that has more to do with like partnership and intimate relationships. And so I started thinking about like, how could that be applied into the world of inclusion and belonging? And my disclaimer is, this is just me sitting on my porch, thinking it through on my own, and would love to continue to expand upon this, and would love for you all to put your voices into this space. And some of it is really easy. Some of them, is kind of gave me room to pause. But when I think of one of the love languages being words of affirmation, that one's super easy for me, because we're in a culture right now that really highlights and lifts up the importance of using affirming language, right? Making sure that whether it's you individually or you as part of an organization, that any spoken or written words that you're putting out there into the world really confirms and supports, uplifts people in a very, gosh, it's so cliche to say a positive manner, but it uplifting them in the way that they want to be uplifted, right? The other thing that I think about when it comes to words of affirmation as it relates to inclusion and belonging lens is that oftentimes individuals who sit within the margins and at the intersections, when folks are talking about the lived experiences, that the dominant culture may be really quick to dismiss it, and not believe what is being expressed. And so when I think of words of affirmation, in addition to affirming language, I think about what it would feel like if somebody just simply believed me when I expressed some of the microaggressions and whatever ism you want to call it that I may be experiencing. Physical touch was a tricky thing for me because that's just interesting to think about through an inclusion and belonging lens. And then what I really settled with is, again, when I think about individuals who are constantly undergoing these experiences, these traumatic experiences, right? They could benefit from feeling connected, from being seen. And so first ask if some sort of physical touch would be okay. And it got me thinking about, like, it's not necessarily having to do with actual touch, but, perhaps when you see someone being the victim of any type of microaggressions, like, I recognize that as an individual, as an ally, we're not asking you to put yourself in harm's way. And there are things to do, like you can simply stand next to that person that's experiencing that level of microaggression or micro assault. It could be standing in between, whatever it is, like placing yourself in a way that the person who's on the receiving end knows that you are there. So that's what I think about when I think about love language of physical touch. Gifts, it just stays the same. I think it stays the same with the understanding that you yourself, right, definitely have most likely experienced some level of hardships, and nobody is taking that away. What I'm saying is that if it's not due to your race, if those hardships are not due to your gender, if it's not due to your sexual orientation, etc., you are simply recognizing that this level of gift giving, right? Whether, I know the examples for gifts in the love languages are things like massages, going out to eat, like, gifts, right? I think it stays the same. The difference is you're providing that gift with the knowledge that by doing this, I know that the hardships that you are enduring, you're enduring in addition to, because of your race, of your gender, and your sexual orientation, and etc. I think acts of service, I think about acts of service being some, it's ultimately what we're trying to do something to go out of our way to make someone's life a little bit easier, right? By doing something. And so when I think of acts of service, I think of those things like when you see something, you say something. Whereas like the physical touch thing that I explained, where you're just kind of placing your body next to someone. When I think about acts of service, one of the ideas I think of is in those situations where you're witnessing something happening, that you use your voice, you use your whatever level of privilege that you might hold, to be able to say something in the moment and call out those social injustices. And the caveat to that, or the disclaimer to that, would be, my hope is that when people do speak up, when these situations occur, that they're not necessarily doing it to save the day, to be a hero, to do it on behalf of the person that is receiving the social injustice, but that it's because you yourself feel that this is wrong, and you want to make sure that individuals around you know that this is not okay. And then when I think of quality time, I think about two things. One is, rather than maybe just putting money into an organization or a nonprofit that does really great work, that you're actually going into the spaces, right? And you're volunteering your time, maybe, right? It could be that you are doing, your own personal work, so that again, you're creating a level of connection to the communities, because you want to better understand what the issues are and what the challenges are for individuals that might not look like you, might have not lived a life like you. And so you're immersing yourself into the experiences and the communities so that you can deepen your analysis. And then the other part, I think I already said it, is quality time is really taking the time to do the trainings and the readings and the workshops that also go back to deepening your analysis. And so again, it's a quick little run through. Those are the things that I thought of. And I want to continue thinking about these things, because what I'm realizing the more and more I do this work is that there is this invisible barrier. And I'll speak from the space of mental health care, because that's the world in which I've been living in for so long. I just did a talk on racial trauma and the implications of mental. Thank you for being there. And so I see it happening over and over again, where again, we're talking about trauma. We recognize what trauma is, yet when we highlight what racial trauma is, there's this invisible barrier that it doesn't allow people to actually transfer the same practices, understanding when it comes to race, right? And so I think the more that we can take things like 5 love languages, people know about it. They might not all love it, but they know what it is. If there's a way that we can create a parallel process, if you will, of helping people understand, like, when we talk about these concepts here, it's actually applicable when we talk about social injustices, right? Or systems of oppression. I can't help but thinking that it might help bridge the gap for maybe not all, but for some. So that's it. That's what I got for you all today. I don't know if anybody has questions, if anybody wants to just kind of, I know that we're doing like a Q&A thing, but I'd love to just have a conversation, right? What stood out to you? Do you have any questions? That's also great too. Hi, Maddie.
I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on some of the questions that were asked last night during the panel. I think it's always been kind of weird and uncomfortable to me, or just felt a little strange when we have diversity and inclusion talks that are led by primarily white people. So especially towards the end of the panel last night, I think there were a few questions about how we make create a more comfortable landing space for minority clients in our programs. And I think that Joe and Paul had some pretty salient answers, and one of those was, creating a mission, or needs to be a program's mission to support diversity and inclusion rather than adjusting programming on smaller levels. But yeah, I'm curious if you had any thoughts on some of the stuff that came up last night.
Yeah, I know that what y'all are going to get, some of you already know me, and so this won't come as a surprise. So I'm very good with being very transparent here. And so here's what I will share with you. Here's what I will say, what I think about that. 2 things. One is I was at the beginning of that panel. I saw who was up on the panel. I heard the comments of it being a very well-rounded, comprehensive panel reflecting what we're trying to do. And I immediately left. I immediately left. One of the reasons why I left was I thought that I was going to be there so that I can actually take in what it was that they're saying. I've been a part of this, that space for a long time now. And to see that it was a white-led panel talking about diversity issues. I did not want to expose myself to that level of anguish and anxiety and disappointment. So I left. B, the other thing that I will say is that's like my raw Tracy answer, the more professional, polished answer. Just kidding. I don't have that either. Is that we're going to come across that so often if folks don't come across it already, right? It wasn't that long ago that I sat at a 3-hour workshop talking about how to best work with students of color that was led by an all-white panel, right? I don't know what happened yesterday. Here's my hope for the future. My hope for the future is that people in the audience, when you start to feel that something doesn't sit right? And I'm not saying you, Jake, because I see it happening, right? And I am also included in this. When we feel in our gut and in our intuition that something doesn't feel right, I know that it can be nerve-wracking to say something in that space because you might not have processed it yourself. And I think that people would be surprised at kind of the domino effect that would come out if one person said, I don't know why this doesn't feel good to me, and it doesn't feel good to me. Here's what I'm seeing. Because I also share this because you're not the first person that I've spoken with today that has shared similar observations. So I think that it's that going back to the 5 love languages, right? Like speaking up, speaking out. Like I think that because it's so prevalent in the spaces, it's just it's going to continue to happen. Dr. Caprice Hollins, if you don't know her, she's amazing. She's based out of Seattle. She's a brilliant clinician who also does a lot of trainings as it relates to inclusion and belonging. One of the first trainings I went to, she was talking about like, I'm a smoker. Like I smoke cigarettes. I don't like telling people that because, it's just really bad. And she mentioned something to the fact that like, she's like, I'll be outside smoking a cigarette and we'll get like the most dirty, like awful looks. She's just like, I want people to treat like racism the way that you treat smokers when they're smoking outside. That level of disgust should be something that we, unequivocally express when we see, these things that are happening. I don't know if that answers your, I don't know if that answered any questions, but those are kind of the thoughts that I have.
Tracy, since you bring up the nuance of the conversation, it brings to mind one of the videos you shared that had the children talking about their different experiences. And I wanted to see what you thought about in that light, terms like BIPOC, because me personally, I feel it's a little bit clumsy, and it can be stripping of the kind of self-determination of individual groups and their justice claims and their ability to speak for themselves. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I hate to sound like a politician here. I think for me, it's a both and situation, right? I remember when the terminology POC came out. And there was, and I'm sure you recall this too, there was there was quite a bit of pushback, especially for those who are Black and Indigenous, because the experiences of people of color do not fully, cannot fully encompass that of the experience of Black people and Indigenous folks, right? And so I think to make it better, we turn to BIPOC, right? And then I don't know if you know this or not, but not that long ago, I learned that it's now BILAPOC. So now it's Black, Indigenous, Latina, Asian, and then people of color. And so, yeah, I think that I did a resource group with our team at Outback Therapeutic Expeditions, and we talked about like just phrases and the concept of being politically correct. I think that when it does more than two things, but the two sides of the coin that I see is when we develop these terminologies, it can, for some people, give them the identity and or the language that they have been craving to be able to speak about it, and feel, more firm in who they are. I also realize that when we create these terminologies, it can actually prevent, like you said, just really being able to, whether it's various services, erasing some of the historical context, right? And experiences that go with it. And so I can see the for and the not for. Yeah, that's why I say I'm probably going to sound like a politician. And by probably, I did.
No, I understand. And I understand that we have examples in regards to communities coming together in order to try to get progress. But I think, especially when we speak as clinicians or clinicians in training, that's important to note, because there's a difference between race and ethnicity. And because a Black person may present at your practice for treatment doesn't mean that there's one playbook in regards to what their cultural experience may be.
That's right. That's right. Gosh, we can do like another session. There's a young kid on that video where he talks about being African American and Irish American, right? And some would say that he's white passing, and ultimately feeling like he had to choose. And depending on his cultural upbringing, who were the influential human beings in his life, you just make me think of, if you met one Indigenous person, then you met that one Indigenous person, right? We can't, or one Black person, like you can't, we shouldn't yet, we haven't had the privilege of being seen as individuals, and being asked to be representative of a collective. So I appreciate you lifting that, Mary.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? I don't know why Maddie didn't bring me dinner. This is what you get when you know the person that's talking.
Nothing is jumping to my mind right now, but I just wanted to say thank you, and let's not stop now. Please keep talking. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for being here, Jen.
I think for me, I have too many things in my mind. It's sort of like sorting them out, and but yeah, I'm so grateful as always, Tracy, for your conversation and passion in this area.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think for me, the big thing is just like Jen said, let's keep talking, and let's keep talking with people outside of this space. Keep talking to your family members. Like my biggest request to people whose identities fall within the dominant culture is to continue having conversations with other people who fall within the dominant culture, right? I always want to uplift like one of my most favorite mentors and friend, Dr. Dante Bryant. He has been a strong influence and strong proponent of just making sure that these conversations happen. And one of the things that he says is, if you were to take out of our country, if you were to just gather up all the racists and remove them from the country, racism would still exist. And the reason why racism would still exist is it is so deeply woven into the fabric of the system that is our nation, the institutions and the structure, that it will continue to be upheld, whether we have individuals who are racist or not. And so, yes, we want to call out the individual acts, and we have to understand how the system came to be what it is now, how it has evolved into to make it look like it isn't what it used to be, so that we can better understand, pinpoint what the issues are, so that we can dismantle that.
You bring me to a comment or a question that I do realize I have, but I don't know how appropriate it is that is a question, but I just want to acknowledge that I feel like I'm missing out because of being surrounded by whiteness. Like last night, I did feel very uncomfortable. And now I hear on this that you also did a speaking event that I missed out on, that I think I would have much more benefited from. But I didn't know about it because I'm, not following the right people, or I'm not connected, or I'm not, you know what I mean? And so I guess like the comment is like acknowledging that and my grief around that. And then the question would be like, how can I get more connected to make sure that I'm not missing out on these opportunities? Please.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Like I know that, especially when it's a topic like this, you want to make sure that if you're doing your own search, that you are making sure that you are going to the trainings and the speaking engagements of someone that is reputable, or is speaking to things in an accurate way, right? And if you don't know that and you don't have that guidance, I know that can be scary. I think that, all of that. And the reason why I utilize the content of other people when I do these things is that I want to also express to people, like, I did a Google search. And there are ratings, there are comments, like you just have to do a little bit more work than, that you might normally, to kind of vet what's going to be an accurate reflection. I don't want accurate is not the terminology. I think that I want to, you know what I'm saying. Hopefully.
Yeah, well, and I just want to thank you too, because, the reason why I felt like, oh, this isn't an appropriate question is like, yes, I should be doing the work. And I love something that you said at the beginning about, working with unconscious bias by developing inclusive habits. And that would be an example of an inclusive habit, is if I was Googling and researching and doing this work to find, make sure that I'm able to attend these.
Yes. And well, I also want to lift up the fact that you're just like, okay, ding, ding, ding. Like I am now very fully aware that I may not be looking in the right spaces, or I might not be putting myself in those right spaces. And so now it's just going back to the drawing board and being like, okay, forget where I've been. Let me make these other searches to figure out where I could go, and then just trying it out. Because I think, you and I know each other, right? So it would be different. I just told this to somebody else yesterday. I was like, I know you, we have a level of trust. And so when that person would come to me and ask questions, I know that that person has either done some sort of work on their own already, right? And they're wanting to make sure that they're on the right track. And or they're asking me a question because they genuinely want to do their own work. When we don't have relationships with people and we get hit with, where do we go and what do we do? And, you know, it's a reminder that it's a reminder of us continuing to give in the midst of our the impact that we have to endure. Like, we're still expected to give, right? So I don't know where I'm going with this, other than I understand what you're saying, right? Like, it's just, yeah, I see you recognizing, like, I'm in this situation where I don't think I'm in the right place of getting the information that I want and need. So where do I go? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Matt, you had your hand raised, but I don't know if you had it raised before or after.
You can go first.
You had your hand raised before me.
Okay.
Matt, wanted to
All
go.
right. Yeah, I put it down because you two had kind of gotten there, that what comes up for me, and I saw it in one of the animated videos that you showed, and it's come up in the workplace a lot with telling our team, like, my door is always open, and here endeth my responsibility, because I've announced to you that my door is open. So therefore, you need to take the action steps and come into my door. Because I mean, I'm sitting in my office. I'm here. I guess no one has a problem because no one's freaking knocking on my door. So we're good. I've done my part. And this came up in a staff meeting in the middle of me repeating this offer, which was nothing more than a passive gesture, right? I was like, I'm going to cuss. I was like, oh shit, no, I'm going to actually reach out to each member of my team, find out what their schedule is for the next 2 months, set up an appointment that's convenient for their schedule so that they can talk to me. They can give me an agenda to tell me what we're going to talk about for the next hour and a half. Mm-hmm. So I think about like that in the context of inclusion, in that, like, yeah, I'm inclusive. I'll bring the services that our organization, the pivot point is inclusive.
Yeah.
And by declaring that, I think of Michael Scott saying, declaring bankruptcy, because I have stated, and it's on our website, and I've said it in any marketing opportunity that I've had, or any like power networking lunch. Power is not the right word to throw in there. I've done my part.
Yeah.
And I listen to Jen. Thank you for bringing it up. Like, no, I gotta do the recon, and I gotta be wrong a lot, because I'm coming from a place of assumption and ignorance. Yeah. And I think back to the conversations the first conversation I had with you, actually, like, and a degree of like, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm seeing it in a very homogenous culture. Do you mind if I pull up a chair and have a seat at this table, and like we could have a conversation? And I don't know what would have happened if the response was no, you can't, you don't have a seat here. I'd like to think that it would just be like, all right, cool. But then it's about asking the next person and trying again. So what I appreciate in this ramble is what I'm getting at. What I appreciate of what this has brought up and reinforced for me is that the declaration of open-mindedness is not sufficient.
Right.
The declaration, and I'm not saying like it's necessarily posturing, like I'm like best of intentions, but I mean, I was at the SEUS conference in 2019, and I told everyone, a room full of placement specialists, why I was turning this into a nonprofit. And I didn't do it in a diplomatic and professionally well-received way. Mm-hmm. And the whole room that was nodding their heads and in support of what I was doing, it stopped, and people were staring daggers at me. And I remember apologizing to Daniel Fishburne as I gave him the mic back. I was like, I'm sorry, I got nervous. And what was interesting is there were 50 people in that room, and all of them I perceived like anger and disgust and frustration because I named something that they didn't want to talk about. I would say of the 50 people, 47 of them at the next meal at the conference individually, not when other people could see them or hear them, came up to me and thanked me for what I said. Yeah. So it's a lot of proactive.
Yeah. Yeah. You made me think of Sheryl Sandberg. I know I may not want to promote her at this moment in time. And she wrote a book called Option B. And it was all about her experience after her husband died unexpectedly. And the way that she talked about it was, again, through the process of grief, right? We're so, because our intentions are like, well, what can we do? What do you just let me know what it is that you need me to do? Well, I have no idea. Right. But I can feel good about myself maybe because I asked, I put myself out there. I was just like, hey, I'm here for you. You just tell me what you need. As opposed to, she talked about a friend being like, instead of being like, hey, are you hungry? Or, hey, if you're hungry, let me know. She had a friend who said, do you want a chicken sandwich or a burger? Right? Like, recognizing her capacity is in. And I think the big thing that comes up for me in this conversation, which goes back to the racial trauma and the implications of mental health talk, is the experiences of microaggressions and racism and discrimination. Why can't I say it? I couldn't say it earlier either.
It's tough. It's tough word.
Is it communal? Is that the word?
Cumulative.
Yes, cumulative.
We can dub it over. I'm recording it. We can just dub it over. It'll be fine.
Anyway, so this is something that happens over an extended period of time. That's what I'll say. Because it's not recognized as experiences of trauma, right? Chronic trauma. I think that people with the best of intentions when it comes to like, hey, just tell me what it is you want me to do, aren't fully understanding, and I'll put myself in this example, aren't fully understanding what has happened like over the last 48 hours, right? For the last 48 hours, I'm grappling with all the things that are popping up on social media about what happened between Chris Rock and Will Smith, and bringing up all kinds of stuff, right? And watching, in all transparency, white people weighing in on certain things that doesn't necessarily encompass all of what may have occurred. And it bringing up a lot of things within me, right? So that's something that's happening. Then I go into an environment that I know will bring up various levels of trigger and has been a source of racial trauma for me. But I go into that space as part of, the work that I do. And so I'm enduring that and having to find the courage or the ability to speak up, even though it might be just me saying the things, and feeling exhausted from that, knowing that I have to do 2 presentations on this topic, right? So then, all of this is happening. And then to have, I'm not saying it happened here. What I'm saying is just paint a picture, to then have somebody that I don't really know, who probably had the best of intentions because they really do want to do a good job and understand, ask me to take time out of my day to then educate them. My hope is that that person can at some point understand how exhausting it is to continue to put ourselves in these situations, knowing that the experiences of trauma aren't being fully recognized, right? So yeah. Anyway, is it Rasha?
Yes.
Yes.
It's Rasha.
Yes, you had your hand raised as well.
I did. A couple of things that came up when Mary was first talking and sharing, and then again when Jen was sharing. And just for context, like, I'm in North Carolina. I think I'm the one that you all don't know. Perhaps that's my position in this room or in this space. So hello, it's nice to see all of you. And you too, Mary. I can't see you, but it's nice to be with you. So I'm a counselor educator, and I attended Tracy's a session earlier today. And so I don't think it was by accident that I signed up for both of these. And I had I didn't pay attention at all. I was like, oh, it's her again. So I say all that to say, like, two things come up for me is intention, right? Like, what is the intention? And then also like grace. So when Mary was talking a little earlier, kind of the really nice question that Mary posed, and then kind of what you were mentioning, Jen, just a moment ago around like wanting the information and being in the place. And I think even Jake was also mentioning about, like, Tracy, your impressions of what happened. And I wasn't privy, like, I don't know anything about what happened with the panel. I don't have any of that information, but just hearing the context of what you all are saying, what comes to mind is intention. So it's like this idea of like dismantling, decolonizing, moving toward liberation is a process. It's not going to happen overnight because these systems weren't developed overnight. And the way in which we were indoctrinated, all of us were, it doesn't matter what shape or what color or what background we come from, we're all indoctrinated by the same systems. Like, we weren't indoctrinated overnight, and they weren't built overnight. And so it's kind of this like idea of grace, right? It's the give yourself grace and give other folks grace as we move through this process. And just don't stop doing the work. Like, the only way you can, in my humble opinion, the only way you can get it wrong is if you stop doing the work. If you just stop, then that's, in my opinion, wrong. But there's no wrong way to go through this process of decolonizing the way in which we interact with other people, other humans, the way in which we think about ourselves and our own social position. There's no wrong way to do it. It's just, the intention. Like, my intention is to understand and to know more, and to know more today than I did yesterday. Yeah. And that knowing process, right, is again a process, and it's not the getting it right. What comes to mind when I think about the intention piece is, the white supremacy mindset is there's this linear fashion, and there's a wrong way and a right way. And if I follow this formula in this fashion, then I'm going to do it right. And as a counselor educator, I see it with my students all the time, especially my white-bodied students. Like, they want to know, how do I do this right? How do I do multicultural counseling right? And I'm like, well, you'll find out like the day before you die, because I don't really know what to tell you, because things change, yeah. People change, your awareness of things constantly changes. And so just like be gentle with yourself. And that's what I'm telling myself too, right? Be gentle with myself as I go through this process. And I just resonated so much with what you were talking about at the very, very beginning, Tracy, with the intro, and like having to, my interpretation of what you said was having to learn how to explain my existence with being a child of immigrants. I'm also a child of immigrants. And also for my own experience in terms of like talking about explaining my existence has to do with like my Blackness, right? So in Black spaces, or having gone to an HBCU undergrad, I didn't have to really explain my Blackness. But then once I left that space and I was in a space that was predominantly occupied by white-bodied, was like, well, what are you and what are you mixed with, and these kinds of questions. And I live in the South, I'm in North Carolina. There's all of this, being Black enough, or being down enough. And so I say all this to say, like, there's some of this is my own personal experience, and some of these things are things that resonated when you were speaking earlier, Tracy. And then back to the intentionality and the grace, right? Like, what is your intention by asking the questions and attending the workshops? Is it to get it right, or is it to learn more? And it doesn't have to be one or the other. And just like, I may get someone's pronouns wrong. And I'll say that at the beginning of my class, if I mispronounce your name, or if I get your pronouns wrong, please correct me so that I can know. But if you don't mind, don't call the White House and tell them that I got your pronouns wrong before you tell me. Like, tell me first, and then we'll work it out. So grace, intention, and thank you, Tracy, for your work.
Yeah, no, I appreciate all of you. I think I heard so like between Jen, Mary, Matthew, Rasha, this concept of like just not giving up and the importance of doing our work, and that one person's response and or reaction, my hope is that it's not the reason why we stop doing the work, right? Yeah, I think we're over time. Sorry, Matt.
Oh, me.
You're like,
Five Guys closes at 10, so we're good.
I'm hanging out.
I'm avoiding making dinner for my kids. As long as I'm on Zoom, you're on your own.
No, I am happy to keep this on a little bit longer if people want to, because I realize if I leave, then this meeting ends. Tracy, I do want to thank you for bringing this up. And I think part of the reason, one of the reasons I appreciate your presence and your intention is that I don't perceive that you do present the information that inspires you or you are curious about as I don't think you come across as an expert, but you still somehow for me maintain being a teacher, and yeah, you give me stuff to think about, and that's all I can really ask of anybody, and I don't think it's fair that it is a task for any one person to present information from a place of expertise, but I think one of the things I learned in the recovery lens that I've experienced is to speak from my experience and my own observations, and to be able to stand by those in the face of people who disagree with me, and to make it a conversation. If it stays a dialogue, as uncomfortable as it may prove to be, then there's trudging or otherwise, there's progress being made and there's growth happening. And that stuff happens when people are uncomfortable, full stop. I mean, agitation is where change starts. So
yes, that's why I'm a disruptor.
You are at that.
Yes. No, I appreciate this. Let's keep doing it. Same time tomorrow, right? Same bat channel. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'm busy tomorrow, but I can give you our Zoom login. But yeah, I mean, happy to, as I said to those who are a little late getting on, this is going to be up on our community resource page. This is available with Tracy's permission. All the other talks that are on there, we have the permission of all presenters to share this with whomever you think this would resonate with. Those who don't have access to it, or who were just busy, or who signed up and then didn't show up.
Yeah. Why can't Jake, if you're going to be there tomorrow at the symposium, I can't wait to have a further dialogue with you.
Off camera.
Yeah.
Tracy, you said you were going to share a link of the there was a LinkedIn program.
Yes.
Could you do that before logging off?
Well, yes, I can do that.
Or you could do it by email or however you had planned. I just wanted to, I was
I
very
don't-
interested in that.
Matt, would it be too much if I just sent a list of all the stuff? Is there a way for you to just email it out to all the?
Oh yeah, send it to me, and I'll send it out to everyone who registered, whether or not they were in attendance. And this is our website and the resources page.
Awesome. Does that work, Jen?
Yes, that's better because I've never been able to figure out how to copy and paste from Zoom.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Amplifying access at every turn.
That's
so
great.
So I'm happy to send that out to everyone. Those of you who were here, because I don't have a quiz for those who are doing this off of the website, please email me directly. Putting my email in here right now, and I'll send you continuing ed credit.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, so we got that approved to offer up a free seat.
You do know she can't copy that off of there.
Yeah, but she's got a notebook. I saw it. I saw her messing with the notebooks. She can write it down. And to be honest, Jen, you probably, unless you're deleting it, you should have my email address. Yeah, if there's anything else or any other lingering questions, maybe Tracy can give her contact information in the chat and y'all can continue this.
That.
Maybe not. I don't want to make any assumptions about that.
And
But
Tracy, you said you'd be there tomorrow?
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes. I don't know, Jake, I didn't hear you say whether you were going to be there tomorrow or not. Hear you.
I think I'm bringing donuts, Jake. I don't know if that's a factor, but based on all the Chinese food cartridges behind you, I think it might be a factor.
I would be so into donuts. Yeah, and I wanted to say, Tracy, I do, circling back to your the original theme of the presentation. I do think that yeah, having something else to add to the toolbox is helpful, and I appreciate you kind of framing the DEI stuff through the love languages lens, because that is something that like comes pretty naturally to me, and I already understand, and it just makes it easier to implement some of the stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. You know what that was? That was words of affirmation. Thank you very much. All right. Well, we're all besties now, so
Yeah, I was gonna ask, does this feel
it feels
completed?
good. It feels good. I feel heard and seen and celebrated. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. That was
All
really,
right.
really nice.
Thanks, all.
Appreciate y'all being here. I'm gonna stop recording and kick y'all off.
Hey, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.